Joining us right now on the phones, GOP political strategist. It's Matt Mackowiak. Matt, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Chad. I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing well. Thanks for joining us today. Let's start off with an article that really generated a ton of buzz over the weekend. New York Times with a story out about possible shadow campaigns for Republicans who may want to run in 2020. Mike Pence was among those listed as someone who may run against Trump if Trump, were to either decide to run and is not very popular or is ousted somehow. Obviously, it's way too early to make any predictions, but what would make, and is there anything that would make a Republican want to set up at least the campaign infrastructure looking ahead towards 2020? Is there anything that would make anyone want to do that right now?
Well, I mean, I do think it's early, obviously. But, I think there is uncertainty about what the future holds for the Trump presidency. Obviously, the most likely scenario is that he does run for re-election. He's already filed a re-elect campaign committee. He's already raising money. But keep in mind, I mean, until we see how the midterm elections go, it's going to be very hard to know what the political environment will look like in 2020. We don't even know what it'll look like next November for the midterms. But the reason that you're starting to see some ambitious Republicans, travel the country, start raising money, building their organizations slowly, carefully, quietly, is in case Trump chooses not to run for re-election, either due to the Russia investigation leading somewhere serious, or perhaps it's entirely possible Trump will just choose not ultimately to run for re-election, that he doesn't like the job or that he thought 4 years was enough or he wants to go back to business. And so, obviously the sitting vice president would be in a very strong position in that kind of circumstance. But look, there's a lot of people that want to be president of the United States. That's true at any time, and it's true today as well. And so, you want to be as far ahead if the opportunity presents itself as you can be. If you do nothing and then 3 years from today or 2 years from today, the president says he's not running for re-election, and then you want to get started, it's probably too late.
Interesting. Like you said, I think it's way too early. Hey, with what's going on in the news next week is unpredictable, really, with the modern political landscape. Although there's, when it comes to politics, there's also a position open in the Trump administration that a couple of people may want, and that is Homeland Security. Rick Perry is at least one name that's been rumored, but also Mike McCall, correct?
Yeah, there's certainly two Texans who would be ideal choices, and they're strong in different ways. You look at Perry. Number one, he's already in the cabinet, so you don't have any concern that he could be confirmed, and then he knows what he's getting himself into, and then it's a commitment he's willing to make. Number two, as governor of Texas, the longest serving in the history of the state, 14 years. He has a tremendous working knowledge of the border and border security, and he really focused on that. In fact, sending Department of Public Safety troopers, DPS troopers, down to the border when he believed the Obama administration was failing to secure the border. So as it relates to border security and the issues along the border, I think Governor Perry would be a very strong candidate. Does he want to leave energy to go to Homeland? I don't know. And, of course, that then opens up energy, which would create another nomination. And so I don't know whether that's something the White House is necessarily going to want. Now, Michael McCall is probably in some ways better prepared because he's been House Homeland Security Committee chairman for several years now. He's written bills on immigration enforcement, written bills on border security, funding bills for the Department of Homeland Security. He knows the department backwards and forwards. The question for him is this something he wants? I think my understanding is he was a finalist the first time when they announced John Kelly would be the choice. Does he want to leave his committee chairmanship? Does he want to leave his safe congressional district? Does he want to leave effectively living in Austin? Because being a cabinet secretary requires you really to move to Washington, D.C. and live there. So there's some personal considerations that both Perry and McCall would both need to make if they were ultimately offered that job. But there probably will be several other people that are seriously considered as well.
Matt, let's take a look real quick at some statewide politics. You have the special session obviously going right now down in Austin, and not a lot of time left down there, and in fact, the days are really moving pretty quickly. About 10 days left in the special session, and nothing on the governor's desk yet, including sunset. As I believe neither chamber has agreed to the other's sunset bills. What are your predictions for this special session with 10 days left?
Yeah, this thing is moving at a glacial pace, and I think that's very frustrating for a lot of conservatives who came into this special session with real high hopes. It's so hard to tell kind of whether the House and Senate are ultimately going to get together or cut a deal to agree on certain things. Ultimately, I do think there probably will be 4 or 5 things that do finally get to the governor's desk at the very end. Annexation reform seems likely. Both sides are moving closer to the middle on property tax reform. A number of the pro-life bills have gotten through. Maternal mortality is highly likely, I think, to get through. But, boy, there's a lot of major conservative bills out there that are just nowhere in the House. And, keep in mind the Senate has passed, I forget what the current number is, 18 or 19 of the 20 items, and they did that really in the first 10 days. The House really has moved very slowly. I think that's been intentional. And so I think those are the things that will maybe get through. There's 10 days left. These things generally do come together at the end because deadlines focus the mind. But, there's going to be a lot of answering to the voters in terms of what ultimately gets through and what doesn't. And I think a lot of these bills are bills conservatives around the state of Texas who are highly likely to vote in next year's primary. They're going to be very disappointed that a lot of these things didn't get done.
One of the stories that you include in your morning email was from the Houston Chronicle, and it was about some House members who were exploring how to oust the House Speaker, Joe Straus. There's been a handful that they've explored this year after year after year. Obviously, they've been unsuccessful at that. Let's say the House Speaker does run again for Speaker. Let's say Straus runs again in 2019 for Speaker. Do you think this session will create any more of a groundswell to oust him?
So there's kind of 2 ways to answer that, right? 2 answers to that question. The first question is, does the makeup of the House of Representatives change? Ultimately, are a number of, let's say, conservative sort of Straus critics defeated, or perhaps more likely are a number of Straus supporting members defeated in primaries, committee chairs, lieutenants, things like that. The time to run primaries from the right would be in a non-presidential year, so this could be the year to do that if they can find good candidates, make sure they're well-funded, make sure they run good campaigns, and obviously use the disappointment of a mostly failed special session to fuel that anger and that voter turnout. Now, the second answer goes to that story, and that is, can they change the rules within the Republican conference in the Texas House so that it mirrors what you have in Washington, where the Republican conference chooses their nominee for Speaker first, and then the House votes for Speaker? Seems to me any Speaker of the House ought to have a majority of their own conference. And it's not clear right now. I think Straus probably would have a majority if they took a vote today, but we've never had that happen. That's never been something that Straus has allowed or the conference has allowed, and so that's something that you're seeing some of the hardline conservatives push for going forward, is a new sort of set of conference rules that would require a private vote among Republicans to choose their nominee for Speaker of the House, basically to not let Democrats and other members ultimately decide who the Speaker is initially, have that be a decision for the Republican members of the Texas House. And I think that makes perfect sense.
It'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward, how much, if Straus becomes a big talking point in some of these different elections. There's definitely some ammunition that the governor's given, that the lieutenant governor has given those who want to at least get rid of Straus. They have maybe more ammo now than they've had ever in the past.
Yeah, I think there's probably something to that. I mean, if you just look at this special session and even the regular session, there's a number of things that people really wanted to see pass. And the House seems to be a place where conservative legislation goes to die. The Senate is a place where conservative legislation passes quickly and early, both in the regular session and the special session. Now, members of the House believe that they're protecting the economic interests of the state, that they're making sure that the legislature is not doing things that are irresponsible or too extreme or too conservative. I mean, I don't doubt their sincerity, but you're right. I mean, Straus is going to be a bigger issue in these primaries next year than we've ever seen before, because I think there is greater frustration with the House among the grassroots in the Republican Party and they're in the Republican primary than we've ever seen.
Matt, tell folks how people can sign up for your morning email and also the latest episode of Mac on Politics.
Yeah, morning email Monday through Friday at mustreadtexas.com. We pull all the news from around the state and put it in one place and send it to your inbox. And our podcast, we have 2 new episodes up, taped in the last few days. The first is with Michael Reagan, the son of former President Ronald Reagan, where we compare Reagan and Trump. Very interesting episode. And then we just posted an episode with a rising star congressman from Florida named Ron DeSantis, who has been leading the charge to investigate Debbie Wasserman Schultz over this insane story of a Pakistani citizen who was working as an IT aide for members of Congress, who was arrested at the airport with $15,000 cash and was wiring money to Pakistan and all kinds of stuff. It's a crazy, crazy, crazy story. Check out the Mac on Politics podcast. It's in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and on the web at mackonpolitics.com.
As always, Matt, appreciate your time. We'll visit with you next week.
Thanks, Chad. Take care.
You too. That's Matt Mackowiak.